The planet is on a healing path from coronavirus. Vaccination against COVID-19 has begun around the world. The best virologists promise to bring people back to normal reality. What's happening now in different countries? Where quarantine has become a way of life? When can we breathe again without masks? All this in the Stop COVID program. A scandal flares up in the world around the British-Swedish vaccine. Previously, it was considered one of the most promising. Oxford University took an active part in its development. From the very beginning, the British-Swedish drug was the leader in the number of orders. 70 countries signed contracts with the company. Now more and more news appear, either about a fatal outcome after using the drug or about problems with blood circulation. Blood clots appear among the recipients. A direct connection of the side effects with the vaccine has not yet been proven, but more than 10 countries have already suspended or completely abandoned the ordered doses. Europe became the epicenter of the scandal, but accidents are registered also far beyond its borders, for example in South Korea. Eight deaths have already been counted in the country, but unlike Europe, elderly people have suffered in all cases. The vaccine has not yet been abandoned there. Correspondent Vladislav Tsoy has more details about that. In South Korea, coronavirus vaccination began almost 3 weeks ago, but so far it has not been possible to reduce the rate of spread of COVID-19. Experts attribute this to the fact that ordinary citizens will only start getting the vaccine in April. Almost 600,000 people were vaccinated. This is more than 1% of the population. All of them are medical professionals, as well as employees and residents of nursing homes. Mainly, a European drug was used for vaccination. After its use, 8 people died in the country, but the South Korean Ministry of Health is reassuring there is no connection between death and vaccinations. The deceased were of old age and suffered from chronic diseases such as heart disease and diabetes. However, the government will still pay compensation for up to 430 million won, or $378,000, to the relatives of the victims. Expert Chon Dae-hoon notes that there are few deaths after vaccination. The professor intends to vaccinate himself and advises everyone to do it. Chon believes COVID-19 won't go away even next year. Therefore, he advises to be prepared for new outbreaks of coronavirus infection.
지금 이제 여러 가지 연구 결과들이 나오고 있는데 특히 남아프리카에서 연구 결과 같은 경우에는
It is believed that people who have had coronavirus develop antibodies and they should not be afraid of COVID. But the effective defense of the body is achieved not by its own immunity but with the help of a vaccine. Therefore, regardless of whether a person was sick or not, it's better to get vaccinated.
과거에 코로나19에 감염되었든 감염되지 않았든 상관없이 접종하는 게 좋습니다.
Coronavirus infection in domestic animals has caused alarm among South Koreans. The first such incident occurred on January 21st. The kitten fell ill. Doctors believe that the virus was transmitted to it from its owner. She and her daughter went to church in Jinju City where the COVID-19 outbreak occurred. Although there is no evidence that humans have been infected with the virus from animals, authorities have advised cat and dog owners to keep their pets at least 2 meters away from passers-by, just in case. In February, pets were screened in Seoul. The first tests were taken from a Cocker Spaniel. The dog has symptoms of the disease. Earlier, the coronavirus was found in its owner. Fortunately, the dog was healthy. If the COVID was confirmed, it would have to undergo a 2-week quarantine at home. To test for coronavirus in cats and dogs, as well as in humans, samples of material are taken from the nose. But it's much more difficult for doctors to work with animals.
일단 신청 대상은 확진자와 밀접 접촉한 증상이 있는
If a pet whose owner is infected with the coronavirus has a fever, runny nose, cough, vomiting, and diarrhea, then a special team will come and take a test.
서울시에서 검체 채취반이 가정으로 방문을 해서 검체를 채취하게 됩니다.
Чтобы сдержать распространение коронавируса,
To contain the spread of the coronavirus, Seoul and the metropolitan province of Gyeonggi have decided to maintain a second level of social distancing. There are 5 such levels in total, and the second is considered a regional epidemic. It implies a number of restrictions. Museums, restaurants, karaoke bars, and other entertainment establishments are closed. In addition, a group of more than 4 people have been banned from gathering in one place in the capital for several months. And for the local population, these are very strict rules.
не только предприниматели.
На мой взгляд, конечно, есть перегибы. И я тоже, мне кажется, что ограничение на собрание более 4 человек – это уже чересчур, тем более, что оно…
In my opinion, there are, of course, excesses, and it seems to me restrictions on meetings of more than 4 people are already too much. Moreover, it has been going on for quite a long time, and just recently it was extended for another 2 weeks. This, of course, hinders our work, including us as journalists. Almost all press conferences are transferred online. It's difficult to organize any meetings and other events. Well, what to do? If the authorities decide that it helps, then who are we to argue with them?
Как бы, если власти решили, что это помогает, то кто мы такие, чтобы с ними спорить?
Journalist Stanislav Varivoda spent 2 weeks in quarantine. The coronavirus was found on his daughter. The child and his mother were admitted to the hospital while Stanislav was at home. For everyone who is forced to isolate themselves, the authorities provide a set of products and hygiene items. For all 14 days of quarantine, a person must send data about his health to the health department using a mobile application.
Тест на коронавирус.
В 2015 году они пережили, ну не эпидемию, но, скажем, вспышку, да, MERS.
In 2015, they survived not an epidemic but the MERS outbreak. This helped them practice quarantine measures and response capabilities. Not much time has passed since then. It is still not forgotten. And the second factor, it seems to me, is the presence of North Korea nearby. It doesn't allow them to relax, and they constantly conduct civil defense drills and, among other things, work out measures against a possible biological attack. And in general, this also played a role.
В гражданской обороне, и в том числе отрабатывают возможности биологической атаки. И, в общем-то, это тоже сыграло свою роль. Ну и плюс все высокие технологии, которыми славятся.
Well, plus the high technology which South Korea is famous for. Opportunities to quickly, efficiently track the contacts of infected person using the positioning of mobile phones and quickly limit and isolate everyone. This, of course, also played a role. Therefore, it seems to me that South Korea is doing very, very well.
Что Южная Корея тут очень-очень хорошо работает.
Правительство Кореи планирует вакцинировать до 70%.
The Korean government plans to vaccinate up to 70% of the population by November this year. Contracts have been signed with 5 globally renowned vaccine suppliers. Almost 80 million doses have been ordered for 50 million South Koreans. The surplus vaccine will be received by foreigners living in the country, and they're also planning to share it with countries in need.
В государственных учреждениях.
Denmark remains one of the leaders in terms of vaccination rates in Europe. In the Scandinavian country, more than 500,000 people have already received the drug. But perhaps the pace will have to be slowed down. There too, the use of the British-Swedish drug was temporarily suspended. Now the country is slowly starting to open up, but as the locals themselves say, the indulgences are so insignificant that they're barely noticeable. In Denmark, rallies and demonstrations are regularly held against harsh restrictions, compulsory vaccination, and mass extermination of animals. Denmark's lockdown began in December. In the first days, they began to close restaurants, cafes. Within a month, everything was gradually closed. After the holidays, we woke up in a completely closed country. The schools were also under the lockdown, so the children had been sitting in front of the screens for 2 months. These 2 months turned out to be especially difficult for the working parents of first graders. They had to teach children themselves and work remotely at the same time. To date, school children from 1st to 4th grades have returned to their desks. Soon, all the students will be admitted to schools, but the conditions in which they will study raise many questions among the public. There are many conditions for school children from 5th to 8th grades. They go back to school only for 1 day a week and only outdoors. That is, they will not be allowed into classes. They will study outdoors under the windows of the school. For all the students, the requirements are more strict. All students over 15 years old are required to take a coronavirus test twice a week. Otherwise, they are not allowed to attend classes. Fortunately, Denmark has created all the conditions so that the procedure does not make life difficult.
Тесты в Дании бесплатные, у нас в каждом районе их несколько тестовых.
Tests in Denmark are free. We have several test centers in each district. You can take the PCR, you can take the usual one and get the result in 15 minutes. For example, we have such a bus in the region. It makes several stops a day. They have a schedule. You can come to any place where it's convenient and take this test and get the result.
Куда удобно сдать этот тест и получить ответ.
While the European Commission is only talking about COVID passports, Denmark has already presented its version of the document of the future. Using the same non-standard methods, the Scandinavian government also solved the problem of Danish mink coronavirus infection. The decision turned out to be a real environmental disaster and economic collapse for local farmers.
В конце прошлого года у датских норок был обнаружен коронавирус, который, возможно, передавался бы человеку.
At the end of last year, coronavirus was detected in Danish minks, which could have been transmitted to humans, and the Danish government decided to destroy them all. 11.5 million minks were killed. Some of them were burnt in incinerators, some of them were buried, and some of them are still in freezers and waiting for their turn.
И часть из них до сих пор лежат в морозильных камерах и ждут своего часа. Датские фермеры были недовольны такой политикой и тоже.
Danish farmers were unhappy with this policy and also went to rallies. Most of the Danish farmers have gone bankrupt and now suing the government. They were forced to fire their employees and naturally a lot of people were left without work.
Уволить сотрудников своих и, естественно, очень много людей осталось без работы.
Rallies and strikes in Denmark are happening more and more often. People are tired of harsh restrictions. Interestingly, despite the ban on mass gatherings, participants are not fined for violations.
Многие датчане сейчас выходят.
Many residents of Denmark are now taking part in peaceful protests against compulsory vaccinations, restrictive measures, and COVID passports.
Ковидных паспортов.
There are sanitizers in every store.
Что у нас осталось открыто, это
What
супермаркет.
we have left open are supermarkets, pharmacies, shops where you can buy some medicine. They were classified as essential for life. Everything else was closed. It was amazing to walk around Copenhagen. It just stands completely quiet, deserted, calm. Everything is completely closed.
Безлюдный и все абсолютно закрыто.
В каждом магазине
There are signs in every store asking you to keep your distance, wear masks, and limit the number of people inside the store.
человек внутри магазина.
Compliance with these measures is strictly monitored both indoors and on the streets. Today, up to 25 people can gather outdoors. Any gatherings in an enclosed space are prohibited. Penalty for violation is €300 per person.
Полиция остановила
The
авто.
police stopped the bus on the way. Not a simple bus, but this one is ordered for the celebrations. People dance, celebrate there together, and ride the bus at the same time. They stopped the bus and there was a party of 55 people. Each of them paid a fine of €300.
Платила штраф 300 евро за нарушение этого правила.
Zoos are going to open in the near future, but in addition to the entrance ticket, they will again require a negative test for coronavirus. Borders for tourists and people without Danish citizenship or residence permits are still closed.
На сегодняшний день такая ситуация в Дании, что
Today, the situation in Denmark is unclear. I don't know what will happen next. But politicians constantly say that Denmark will open up slowly, but we will see. Of course, there is no talk of opening up the borders yet, so we just watch and wait for when we can return to normal life.
смотрим и ждем, когда же мы сможем вернуться к нормальной жизни.
Residents of Cyprus also dream of returning to normal life. They suffer more than others. The island was completely dependent on the flow of tourists. But for a year now, people have lost their main source of income. The mainland world has become as unattainable as the distant planets of the galaxy. The summer vacation season in Cyprus is still in jeopardy. For a year now, the island has been closed for tourists from the CIS countries, its main source of income. Even local residents cannot breathe the fresh sea air. Not only masks get in the way, Cyprus has some of the stringent restrictions across Europe.
Чтобы выйти из дому по своим делам, надо отправить...
To leave the house on your own business, you need to send a combination of numbers to a specific number and receive a return text with permission that you can leave the house and go about your business. You will have 3 hours for everything. If this is not enough, you need to send another text. For one day, 2 text messages are given, that is 6 hours.
Один день дается 2 смс-ки, то есть 6 часов.
If you want to go in for sports, you need to send number 6. If you want to visit someone, you text number 5. A visit to a beauty salon, number 9, and so on. We have already forgotten what freedom is, because you constantly control yourself and think if you sent a text or not. Less than 1.5 million people live in Cyprus. 40,000 of them have managed to become infected with the coronavirus so far. There is now a curfew there. It starts at 9 p.m. and ends at 5 a.m. It was as if the island had been drained of all life. Entertainment centers, hotels, cafes, and restaurants were closed. This is how local establishments work now. You can't sit down at the table. You can only have a takeaway food. Thousands of residents of Cyprus were left without work and don't have an idea how to go on.
Сейчас очень сложно найти работу. Кипр маленький остров, поэтому очень много людей осталось.
It's very difficult to find a job now. Cyprus is a small island. Now a lot of people are out of work and they're all looking for a job. But unfortunately, since there are no tourists now, and in principle, there are not many restaurants and hotels working, many of these places already have employees, so they don't have new openings.
Давно работают, и как бы новых работников они не ищут.
Diana shows one of the most beautiful places in Cyprus. This abandoned village has long turned into an open-air museum and has become a must-see item on the list of tourist attractions. Now there is no one here except the owner of a small tavern.
Куда вы?
Like many other Cypriots, Diana was acutely aware of the effects of the pandemic. The restaurant where she worked was closed indefinitely, and even if the establishment reopens for guests in the near future, tourists will be missed. The girl admits that the last year has added a spoonful of pessimism to the barrel of fabulous island life.
Да, очень повлиял, к сожалению. И еще повлиял на то, что очень тяжело, как бы...
Yes, unfortunately it did. It made a negative impact. It's very difficult. Cyprus is an island, and we cannot get in a car and go to another country, or take a train there. Makes you feel depressed a little because you're used to living in freedom. And now you have to remember all the time, but you need to send a text, and you cannot go to another city.
Там вспомнить, ой, нужно тебе отправить сообщение, там, а в другой город ты там можешь поехать или не можешь.
Throughout this difficult year, the Cyprus government has been supporting its residents with unemployment benefits and childcare. Payments are calculated individually depending on the amount of wages. Families with children experience not only material difficulties, until recently schools remained closed too. The entrance to the playgrounds is still prohibited. Playgrounds are also closed, but many parents and children are tired of prohibitions and already, in spite of them, just come and play. Our kindergartens have not been closed and are still working. Therefore, why the playgrounds were closed, we still do not understand. Only one souvenir shop is open, the rest are all closed. These signs in the roads tell us to keep our distance.
С 1 марта Кипр возобновил сообщения с другими странами, но, к сожалению...
On March 1st, Cyprus resumed communication with other countries, but unfortunately not everyone can get to Cyprus, since the Ministry of Health made a color classification and divided the countries into zones. There is a green area, a red area, an orange area, and a gray area. Only those citizens who officially reside on island of Cyprus or work here can get to us from the gray zone. Tourists cannot come to us yet.
Те граждане, которые официально проживают на острове Кипр или здесь работают. Туристы прилететь пока что к нам не могут.
All vacationers from the CIS countries ended up in the gray zone. But even if it works out to fly to Cyprus, it's necessary to show a negative PCR test at the airport and then spend 10 whole days in quarantine, and an attractive prospect for a vacation. Like other European countries, Cyprus is well behind the vaccination target. To date, only 5% of the population has received the first dose of the drug. Only 2% were fully vaccinated. Now Cyprus is considering all the possibilities to open the borders for the CIS countries, and most likely vaccinated tourists with the new COVID passports will be the first to gain access to the golden beaches. Cypriots believe the beach season will happen